everyone. Hi, lovely to see you all this morning.
Hi.
I love this bit when everybody pops up and we get to see some nice backgrounds. We get to see people's homes. We get to see people that have put their Zoom background on. So it's lovely to see you all on this greyish sort of day. Apparently it's going to get colder, so I hope we've all got our jumpers ready for later on. But lovely to see you. Welcome this morning to the second of our resilience events that we're running in partnership with Warwickshire County Council. This morning we're going to talk a little bit more about workforce resilience. As we know, we think COVID's going to be around that little bit longer, but hopefully brighter news that there's some vaccinations on the horizon. But we certainly know these next few months are going to be a bumpy ride, I think, for businesses, and how we as businesses can support our employees and really work with our workforce to adapt and be the most resilient we can be to come out the other end post-COVID, really. So thank you ever so much for joining us. Just a couple of housekeeping before I introduce our presenters today. I think you're all doing it anyway, because I think we're so used to this world now. I think we're in the world of online meetings. If everybody can just pop mute while the presenters are talking. As I say, I think most of you are doing that anyway. We will be recording today's session because we like to send that link out and really ensure that we can help as many of our members as possible. So we will be recording it. There's the ability to, I'm doing this, I always do there's the ability to ask questions throughout on the chat function. So if things come to you in the middle of our presenters talking, then please do pop that in the chat, and then I can be referring to that at the end. But there is the possibility for Q&A at the very end to talk face to face and actually ask the questions in old style, in traditional style of asking that without using the chat function. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first of our speakers, Emily van der Venter, Associate Director of Public Health at Warwickshire County Council. Emily's waving, and Emily's joined also by her colleague Jo Salvin, so I think they're going to be doing a double act. So I'm going to hand over to Emily and to start the first presentation. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So really lovely to be here today with you all. So I'm Emily van der Venter, Associate Director of Public Health with Warwickshire County Council, and joined by Jo, who's our Wellbeing Partnerships Manager. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of kind of our COVID, the pattern of cases of COVID within Warwickshire, and our local COVID response and the support we can offer to you, and then move on to Jo to look particularly at some local mental health and wellbeing support resources that are available to you and your workforce. So I'll just share my screen now so I can share the slides with you. Hopefully that's come up for you. Oh no, hang on, I'll press share. Hopefully now that's come up for you all. So as I say, I'm just going to take us through. Oh dear, what I should have tested. There we go. The pattern of cases in Warwickshire, our local response, some of the key prevention messages and some of the key COVID secure measures, and I'm sure you're all up to speed around the guidance on COVID secure measures to put in place, but I just want to share with you some of the learning and the kind of risk areas we've identified from local outbreaks to date, and then share with you some contact details and additional resources you can access before moving on to Jo. So this is the pattern of cases from March within Warwickshire. So you can see wave 1 and wave 2. Worth saying it's not directly comparable, because so the blue bars are tests that were undertaken in health and care settings and the number of positive cases there. And then the pink bar is community-based testing. So that obviously was introduced in April and then ramped up throughout this period. So you can see we have had an increase in the health and care cases, albeit slower than seen in the first wave, and a fairly rapid increase since kind of end of August through September and ongoing now, but hopefully seeing a bit of a slowdown in the rate of increase at the moment. So public health in local authorities are a key part of the system. Obviously we've got the national NHS Test and Trace team. They link in really closely with Public Health England, and then we link in really closely with Public Health England from a local authority perspective. So we pick up in local authorities supporting outbreaks within some of the more complex settings, so care homes, schools, workplaces, and complex communities or vulnerable communities such as gypsy traveller sites, homeless communities as well. So where those outbreaks, where it's really important to have an understanding of the local context and geography and partners that we can pull in as required. So when we become aware, we have access to the NHS Test and Trace data of individual cases and contacts. So we do a bit of local contact tracing. If people are lost to follow up, we'll try and make contact locally if the national team haven't managed to contact them. We're also doing a bit of backward contact tracing. So talking to people about where they may have picked up the infection, looking back at a 10-day period. And in some cases, that's just identifying additional venues that we perhaps wouldn't have been aware of, which we can then do further work with to reduce risk of exposure. And we're also doing loads of work around community engagement. It's a really important part of our response locally. We have to take communities with us and keep them on board and make sure we're getting accurate information out to our local communities so that they can protect their own health and well-being, as well as that of obviously friends and family. And then there's lots of work around the clinically extremely vulnerable. So that's essentially people who are immunocompromised due to health conditions or treatments they might be taking. And it also, this time round, recently, we've added people with Down syndrome into that group. So important to be aware of the definitions of clinically extremely vulnerable. Since the 5th of November, the advice has been that they do not come into work. If they can't work from home, then they should be furloughed or put on sick pay, so in discussion with their employer. So we've got a whole range of support available for clinically extremely vulnerable people and people who are self-isolating due to being a case or a contact and don't have social support. So a lot of that is practical support around getting shopping or taking the dog for a walk. We can link people in to local voluntary organisations there. And then from more of a workplace perspective, we've established a COVID-19 prevention and response team within Warwickshire, which is a mix of environmental health officers, trading standards and regulatory services, and public health input into that. So we can provide support to workplaces, be that reviewing risk assessments, or primarily at the moment it's responding to outbreaks and trying to help get on top of those as soon as we can. I'm Warwickshire County Council. There's a bit of a Warwickshire slant on this, but a similar support available from environmental health officers within Coventry City Council as well. I'll share some contact details later. But obviously some of the key prevention measures are as they are in the community: hands, face, space. So wash your hands, keep your distance between people, and wear face coverings when you're in an enclosed space with people you wouldn't normally meet. So actually quite broad criteria potentially there. And being alert to symptoms. So we've obviously got the 3 key symptoms of having a fever, a change in taste or smell, or a new or continuous cough. We do see about 80–85% of people have at least one of those symptoms, but we do see people presenting with slightly atypical symptoms. So other symptoms can include headaches, sore throat, achy body, kind of flu-like symptoms. So it's quite difficult now as we're going into flu season for people to necessarily distinguish between those. So obviously if people have symptoms, they need to self-isolate as soon as they can, call 119 or go to nhs.uk/coronavirus to book a test. In terms of COVID security, I put a link there to the guidance, which, as I say, I'm sure you're all familiar with, but I think it's really important. You know, those hands, face, space measures are important, but they're not everything. So some of the things we've picked up on is really looking at your cleaning frequency. So the guidance says at least twice a day, but it does depend how much kind of people traffic you've got through areas. So it may need to be more than that. And make sure you're using appropriate products. So particularly if you're doing a clean after you've had somebody with coronavirus on the premises, you need to be looking at using a detergent or a disinfectant with at least 1,000 parts per million of available chlorine, or a combined product. We've seen kind of use of antibacterial wipes quite often, which may or may not necessarily be up to scratch. So we can offer advice locally. Environmental health officers can offer advice on what are appropriate products. And it's not just about the product, it's then how they're being used. So if some of the risks are where we're relying on individual staff members to perhaps after they've used a piece of equipment, do a wipe down, and a quick wipe down may not be enough. So just to be looking at that really carefully. Another key risk around how you're rotoring your staff, really try to look at avoiding mixing between different shifts or different work areas. That will be really important in terms of your workforce resilience. So you can really minimise, if you do happen to have one positive coronavirus case, you minimise the impact on your workforce by having a smaller, it's a bit like a bubble concept in a school, but having that kind of pairing or cohorting of staff. And some of the risks we see is where there's that overlap between home and community and workplace. So if you've got people that are living in the same household or are car sharing, it's really important to know that in advance. And how can you factor that into your cohorting of staff as well? So you've got perhaps people that live together or car share working in the same area or working on the same shift. So again, you avoid the risk of further mixing or crossing between shifts for those. Car sharing has definitely been a big risk that we see, and I know it's a difficult one because people can't always avoid it. There's advice around safe car sharing, so if it is completely unavoidable, to wear face coverings, to open windows, to make sure they're cleaning contact points, and almost to be quite anti-sociable, so try and avoid looking at each other when you're in the car and sit as far apart as you can. Some businesses, where it's possible, have worked with agencies where they're kind of shipping people into use buses, and then make sure you really maximise the social distancing on buses. And we've got learning from school transport there that we can help advise with. So that's around kind of having the same people sitting in the same places on the bus each day. So again, if you do have a case, you can isolate people sitting around them rather than necessarily everybody on the bus. But if you have that scenario, obviously come to us at Public Health and we can advise through that. Ventilation is a really important one. Again, the guidance obviously states around avoiding recirculating air, but increasingly we are seeing, particularly where you've got perhaps smaller office spaces, small rooms where people are sharing space for a prolonged period of time, that even if you maintain social distance, there can be a risk of transmission there. So really encouraging you to, even in the cold weather, open windows and maximise natural ventilation. So the recent evidence suggests if you can replace with fresh air around 6 times a day, that seems to be a good amount of kind of airflow to reduce the risk. And then, as I've already mentioned, reducing or avoiding the use of shared equipment. So things like kettles, things like cutlery or mugs in the workplace, actually at the moment suggesting that we remove that and ask people to bring in their own food and drink. And then a really helpful thing is to have workplace champions. So almost that kind of peer challenge. So to have people within the workforce who will take that role to remind people around social distancing, hand sanitizing, etc. But to see that as a positive thing, you know, it feels a bit unnatural, but actually, or rude even, to be asking people to step back, but actually we should be seeing it as around caring for each other and looking out for each other. So if you do have a case of coronavirus in the workplace, the key thing to do is to make sure you self-isolate that individual as soon as possible, and any close contacts. So I'll move on to definitions of close contacts in a moment. Important to talk to the case if they're well enough, so the individual that has symptoms, to try and understand their movements and whether they think there are any close contacts in the workplace. Obviously, if they're not well enough, you may need to talk to the wider staff members. And where possible, some companies have looked at CCTV, so they can have kind of an independent, robust way of looking at close contacts. But I think the really important thing is to have that culture of trust and openness. So even when there's been a breach of what you may have written down in your policy around social distancing, actually people aren't afraid to come forward and admit that, so that you can isolate and get on top of it and control any potential spread in the workplace. And then use it as an opportunity to review any learning that you can put in place to strengthen measures going forwards. Obviously you need to do a deep clean, and again I've put a link there for guidance. And if you do have 2 or more cases, that you think may be linked. So that's if they occur within a 2-week period, then you do need to inform Public Health England. Locally, we also ask you to inform us in public health teams in Warwickshire County Council and Coventry City Council, so the email addresses for those are there, and that just helps us to build resilience into our system so we can support Public Health England to make sure your businesses get a timely response. And our local teams are also available just to give general advice. If you've got any queries or concerns, please get in touch. We're here to support you. So I've put there the number for Public Health England and the number for the environmental health team at Coventry City Council that I mentioned, and then Warwickshire County Council. We do offer out-of-hours support if needed. So it's really important to understand the definition of what we consider to be a close contact. So you may well already be aware of this, but I just wanted to reiterate it because it's so key. So it's about having any face-to-face contact or physical contact within a metre, you're a close contact. If you've had contact within a metre for a minute or more, may not be face-to-face, but it's that minute period, you're a close contact. If you've spent 15 minutes within 1 to 2 metres, you're a close contact. And if you've travelled in a small car or vehicle together, you would also be a close contact. And it's helpful to know in advance, as I said, who car shares with who. So if you do get a case within one of the car sharers, you can jump on it quickly and isolate the other member of staff. And then we also ask you to look at the 2 days before symptoms started in terms of looking at those workplace movements. So that's because there's a pre-infectious period. So before you show symptoms, you can be infectious for 2 days. So it's really important to look at movements there. And I just wanted to flag, that we do have concerns around asymptomatic carriage. It's very difficult to know how prevalent that is. But so we do have occasions where people may have gone to get a test, even though they haven't had symptoms. So in that case, we take the date of the test as a proxy for onset of symptoms. So you take the test date and look back 2 full days there. So when you have a case, the really important dates to record are the date of onset of symptoms. Sometimes we see workplaces recording the day they were notified or the day they had the positive result. But actually, if you're going to do effective contact tracing, you need to know when those symptoms started, or at least when they took a test. So there are challenges in terms of people being infectious and not necessarily being aware of it, which is why it's so important to maintain those social distancing and prevention measures. Obviously, we've got the NHS Test and Trace app now. So if you use that in the workforce, that's one way of really helping with your contact tracing within the workforce. Just to move on, I wanted to flag, obviously people are entitled to sick pay if they're a case themselves, and if they're self-isolating due to being a contact, they should, either if they can't work from home, then they're entitled to sick pay. If staff are losing out on income during their isolation period, they may be entitled to a £500 grant. And something that's not particularly well known about is there is a support hub available for employers. So if you as a workplace are identifying additional close contacts that haven't been identified through the NHS Test and Trace system, then you as the employer need to call that 020 number to inform the support hub of the close contacts, give them the details. You'll need a unique reference number for the case themselves, and then the support hub can link additional contacts to that individual. And then the staff member needs to get in touch with their local authority. So in Warwickshire, that's the district or borough councils, and they should then be on that database so that they can be assessed further for eligibility for those payments. And we know loss of income is a real barrier or potential barrier for people coming forward to report symptoms or even to report close contacts in the workplace. So really helpful to look at your own policies on sick pay, do as the best you can, and communicate the self-isolation payments that are available if people may be losing income. And a few additional resources I wanted to share, which may be of interest for you. So we've got a Coventry, Solihull and Warwickshire website, staysafecsw.info, and there's a whole range of resources on there, from data sources, so you can see the latest patterns in terms of cases, communication resources, including translated materials, again, where there's language barriers, there's resources that can help you get some messages across there. Coventry City Council link there as well for wider links around business support, business grants, etc. And then I've put in the link for Public Health England. They've got a whole wealth of posters you could put up in the workplace, social media content you could share with your employees. So please do have a look and consider sharing those. And then in terms of workforce resilience, I think supporting health and wellbeing at this time is really key. We've started talking about COVID-19 prehabilitation. So that's about getting as healthy as possible before you catch coronavirus, which can reduce your risk of serious illness and support recovery. So if you can support people to be healthy, it may help them to come back to work sooner. So some of the key measures around promoting active travel, stopping smoking, and kind of encouraging behaviour changes, weight loss, healthy diets. So I've put a link there to the Better Health campaign, and there's resources such as apps and self-help advice that people can use to help them make those health behaviour changes. But then really important to think about mental health as well. So there is an association between the impact of stress and anxiety on our immune system. So actually keeping our well-being in a good place can help with that fight against coronavirus as well. And then aside from that, obviously just the impact of the pandemic and going into the second wave again, we are expecting and starting to see increased demand for mental health support. And I think, you know, important to recognise it's quite normal to struggle. We've all been experiencing different challenges and coping in different ways. So please look out for your workforce on that aspect as well. So on that note, I will hand over to Jo just to talk about mental health in the workplace a bit more.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, so I'm going to start off by just looking at a few statistics around mental health. Most of you are aware by now of the 1 in 4 statistics. So 1 in 4 people experience mental health issues in each year. But at any given time, 1 in 6 working age adults have symptoms associated with mental ill health. So in 2014 to 15, there were 9.9 million days lost due to work-related sickness related to stress, anxiety and depression, which was actually an increase of 24% since 2009. And then according to the Labour Force survey on the HSE website, in 2009 up to March of 2020, that number was actually 17.9 million. So you can see we're having a huge increase. Now you could argue that the increase is because mental health is now becoming less stigmatised, more people are reporting it. But actually, if we move to the next slide, you'll see that only 13% of employees actually felt comfortable to disclose a mental health issue to their line manager. So the number is potentially more. We're only looking at the reported mental health issues that are coming forward through GPs and mental health services. Okay, so if we move to the next slide. So there's lots of things that you can do as an individual, but also as a business to support yourselves and each other. And one of the things Emily mentioned was the 1U campaign. So the Better Mental Health part of the 1U campaign is called Every Mind Matters. So if you go onto the 1U website, it covers absolutely everything. There's resources there from quit smoking, nutrition, healthy weight, all sorts of things related to lifestyle. But the Every Mind Matters is actually the link specifically for mental health. And by simply answering 5 questions, you can see on the bottom of the screen on the right hand side there, you take a short quiz, 5 questions, and it actually gives you a personalised programme. So there's tips, resources, hints, advice on how you can support your own mental health. Okay, if we get to the next slide. Again, figures that you may be familiar with, the reported suicides worldwide is around 800,000 suicides per year. That equates to 1 death per 40 seconds worldwide. Shocking statistic. In the UK, there were 5,691 suicides reported in England and Wales during 2018, and the suicide rates for men has been at the highest now for 2 decades. That's come from the Office of National Statistics. 3/4 of those suicide rates, the 5,691, are males. So men between the ages of 45 and 49 still remain at the highest risk, although there is an increase in younger people, so young women, particularly under the age of 25, the suicide rates have increased. And actually between, to make it more personal for us, between 2016 to 18, there was 230 suicides in Coventry and Warwickshire. The pandemic, we don't know that the pandemic is going to be a risk factor, a direct risk factor for suicide rates going up, but what we do know is that it will increase known risk factors to already vulnerable people. And as Emily mentioned, you know, we've all struggled one way or another dealing with the pandemic, whether it's been people furloughed, people being ill ourselves. So there is something that you can access within Coventry and Warwickshire, and it's called the Dear Life website. So this dedicated website, which is a suicide prevention website, it's trying to reach out to people who are in desperate need themselves, or if you've got a concern for somebody. So it was created by health and social care professionals and provides a range of free signposting, support for bereavement by suicide. It dispels the myths around suicide, and it talks about removing the stigma and also suicide prevention training. Can I go to the next slide? So lots of information on here. I just wanted to give you a few examples of the places that you could access support within Warwickshire and Coventry for financial support, for wellbeing support, mental health support. But the one at the bottom is actually the one that I want to bring everybody's attention to, actually, because this is the Employee Assistance Programme. And for any of you bigger businesses, you may have sufficient employee assistance programmes in place. I know from experience that they're quite underutilised by many businesses. And they offer a fantastic service. They cover a range of issues from financial, legal, relationship, health and wellbeing. There's so much support you can access from them. And it's 24/7, 365 days a week, and it's free. However, there are businesses, so 10 employees or less, who quite often don't even have a HR department, let alone an EAP programme. So Warwickshire County Council are extending our internal employee assistance programme to support any of those micro and small businesses. All you would need to do is click on the link. So the link that's on the right hand side of the screen there, if you click on that link, there's just a small document, a small form that you would fill in with your information. It gets sent off, and then we would come back to you and show you how you can access the support. So really good free resource to access, really, for anybody. So micro and small businesses, that's the link that you need to get hold of. Okay, next slide.
Sorry.
That's okay. This one really was just showing you the sum of the national support that you can get, because obviously I appreciate that you all, even though your companies might be in Warwickshire and Coventry, you may have people that live outside of those areas. But there are national websites, there's national telephone numbers, there's apps that you can download. There's so much credible support out there now. And the one thing I wanted to say was, you don't have to have a medically diagnosed mental health illness in order to be struggling with poor mental health. So people can be struggling with all sorts of things, whether it's eating disorders, gambling problems, drug problems. The one thing to know is that there will be support for whatever that problem is. You know, if you go to something credible like the Mind website, for example, they will give you the resources to go everywhere else. NHS also have a whole list of resources. But the main thing is there are plenty of resources out there, so nobody's ever on their own trying to deal with this. And then the last slide. So this is just something I wanted to share with you with regards to some free resources you can get to support you as a business to become a mentally and physically healthier workplace. So the HSE, they have access to posters, leaflets, toolbox talks. If you're the sort of business that deliver out toolbox talks, you can download free ones from there. Business in the community, they have workplace toolkits, and they range on a variety of subjects, from mental health through to musculoskeletal. You know, how do you support people with better musculoskeletal health? So free and access to download those. The Mind ones at the bottom of the screen, so the blue and purple leaflets, Mind have got about 10 different resources you can download, introducing a mentally healthier workplace. And the one thing I will really point out is the wellness action plans. I've used these in a couple of workplaces previously, and they are fantastic. It's just a document that you can download as a line manager to support somebody, or actually as an employee to support yourself. You don't need to have a mental health illness to use them. It's just a list of questions that you ask yourself honestly and think about, what sort of things promote better mental health for me? What sort of things creates a trigger for me to be mentally, you know, suffering with mental poor health? It's a personalised document, so it doesn't get shared anywhere. You can share it with your manager or your team if you want to. but it's a really good document to download and free on their website. So the last 3 things that are on there really, the 5 ways to wellbeing, the little logo which says Wellbeing for Life, and the Thrive at Work, they are linked really through myself working at Warwickshire County Council. So very quickly, during 2019, you may have heard of something called the Year of Wellbeing. I won't go into details, we haven't got time here, but the legacy of that, because it was such a successful campaign, the legacy is that we're moving it into something called Wellbeing for Life. And if I've not been in touch with you already, I will be over the coming months, because we want to involve as many people, residents within Coventry and Warwickshire, and all the businesses within Coventry and Warwickshire to sign up for this Wellbeing for Life programme to get us all fit and as Emily said, prehab, so we're not struggling with the after effects of COVID. So the part of Wellbeing for Life is looking at things like the 5 ways to wellbeing. Now, this is something that's evidence-based, 5 things that you can do in your workplace or in your homes to promote better mental health. So it's connecting with others, keep learning, being active, give to others and take notice. There's a dedicated website that you can go on and have a look. So if you put 5 ways to wellbeing, it will come up for Warwickshire, but it also comes up from Mind or from the NHS. And I can support you with some ideas actually on how you can bring that into the workplace. You could always drop me an email and speak that through. The final thing I want to point out very quickly is Thrive at Work. So this is a free accreditation that you can get as a workplace. You can get dedicated support from a team at Coventry County Council and through the West Midlands Combined Authority, and you're working as a workplace to achieve a bronze, silver or gold award, or there is a newly added foundation level. And it's just looking at different criteria. So there's musculoskeletal health, social responsibility, mental health, physical health. You're basically putting evidence together to say how you support a healthier workplace, and then you're achieving one of the awards from it. Now, as the Warwickshire County Council Wellbeing lead for this, obviously you can contact me and I can support you to get so far, and then I will put you in contact with the team over at Coventry County Council, who can support you with making sure you achieve all the different criteria. You can go onto the Thrive at Work website, but you can drop me and Emily a line afterwards and get more information. But hopefully that's a whistle-stop tour of lots of support that you can access out in Warwickshire and Coventry.
Thank you so much, Emily and Jo. What a whistle-stop tour. I mean, so much fantastic information. I've been furiously writing things down. And are you able to share those slides with all the links? Will Chris be able to do that after today's event? Is that okay, everybody? Brilliant. I was going to say, I just wanted to pull out a few things like the support hub. I didn't realise, I'm sure our HR manager did, but if there was 2 or more cases, they need to contact public health. As I say, I'm sure Matt did know that, but that's worth knowing as well. And all the information, Jo, that you ran through in terms of the Thrive at Work toolkit and lots of information. So there may be some questions after our next speaker. So there isn't anything on the chat at the moment, but as I say, please stay with us because there may be, I had one, if I can jump in later if there is an opportunity, but there may be some amongst our colleagues here. So I'm just going to now hand over to our second presenter, Adam Smythe, from our HR consultant at AHR Consultants. One of our corporate members is joining us today. Adam, can I hand over to you?
Me first, right, unmuted, excellent. Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm one of the senior HR consultants for AHR Consultants. We're a small sort of boutique consultancy, if you like, based out of Rugby, but we're all working from home at the moment, as you can well imagine. So I've been in HR for about 20 years now. Oh my God. But we have seen sort of a huge range of impacts on our client base. We support over 300 SME businesses throughout the United Kingdom. So, you know, hopefully I'll be able to give you some insights of what we've seen and some brief tips and tricks. I'm conscious of time on ways to improve workforce resilience within your teams. So if first of all, Chris, if we think about what is resilience, because it's a question, it's a word that keeps being bandied about quite a lot, but do we actually understand what it means? So if we go to the next slide. There you go. So resilience is in Latin re, meaning back, salire, to leap. So it is about the ability to bounce back. okay, in the face of stress, challenge, adversity. It is the, the ability of an individual and obviously of an organisation to suffer a challenge and then obviously return back to peak performance, efficiency, and that type of thing. There's all sorts of resources out there and all sorts of management consultants that look at business resilience. And obviously people have been impacted and businesses have been impacted very, very, very differently. But I don't think there's a single business that hasn't been impacted at all, no matter what sector you're in, but also about personal resilience. And what I've been asked to focus on today is about the employee or workforce resilience, say that 3 times fast after a few drinks, as opposed to business resilience. Okay, so let's have a think about what challenges us and our businesses have been facing in the recent months of 2020. So if we move to the next slide, there have been a complete range of challenges that have been prompted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, a national lockdown. It's the first time it's happened in my 40 plus years of life. That is a complete change in how we live, how we work, how we do things. So there's been a need for us all to adapt, both personally and professionally. So we've seen the forced closure of businesses, which has obviously had a massive impact, particularly on the hospitality and retail sectors, as well as obviously all the businesses in that supply chain. And that's something that I think some of the support that the government announced was missing a trick at a few points during this process. So some businesses have seen a reduction in demand for products and services, but don't forget, there's also been businesses that have seen a massive peak, a massive spike in demand for their services or products when they are in certain industry or service sectors. So for example, I've got a client in the security and events sector, and they massively redeployed all their people for security, providing that security to the supermarket chains, etc., to ensure that obviously they had work for them, but also to support the increase in the need and the demand in those services. We've seen a massive influx in, or a migration of, the workforce from non sort of operating sectors into the care sector, a massive campaign. And that's been really, really important, because as a country, we've got to make sure we can migrate our workforce to where it's needed, where it's appropriate. The stress and anxiety, both personally and professionally, cannot be underestimated. I think this has been certainly for me and for many of my clients, it kind of felt like the whole country's a bit of a raw nerve at the minute. Sort of we're all feeling exposed. This whole year, I was saying to the other presenters this morning, can't work out whether it's dragged or whether it's flown by. It is really, really bizarre. But it's important to make sure, like my colleague speakers were saying, that we've got an action plan to address stress and anxiety in the workplace. Health and safety compliance, that's been massive. In fact, our health and safety arm very, very quickly developed a COVID-19 workplace risk assessment and management system, which has obviously been a godsend to our health and safety clients. And just the change in the working requirements, having to work differently, having to work smarter, work better. And that's been a massive challenge, not only because human beings do not like change. Generally, we tend to be creatures of habit. And obviously your own perspective on change will impact how you react to it. And that may well then have had a knock-on impact on performance, conduct, and attendance at work. Okay, we have not seen a decrease in disciplinaries, investigations, attendance management challenges during this pandemic. Yes, we've had a massive amount of calls about job retention scheme applications, what's this furlough thing, restructures, redundancies, but we've also seen people needing help with grievances, investigations, an increase in tribunal claims. I think our incoming tribunal claims, I think we took on an additional sort of 15 to 20 claims in the space of a couple of months, because, like I said, people are raw nerves. People are wanting sort of their access to justice, and if they feel aggrieved about anything, they can get obviously access to free advice through ACAS. They are more apprised of their rights. So as employers, we need to know what we're doing, and we need to make sure you guys have access to the right HR and employment law support. So that may sound like doom and gloom. but there are solutions. So if we move on to have a think about, okay, you know, we've got all these challenges, how do we deal with them? And as an employer, certainly, particularly for smaller employers, I mean, we tend to support sort of 50 to 250 employee businesses. So clearly the SME sector, I think flexibility has got to be the key. You know, you've got to be flexible with how you're seeing your business, and you've got to be mindful and flexible with your people. Much of the ACAS and government advice and guidance, particularly on matters like untaken annual leave, for example, you know, the guidance there is talk to your people, work out how you can give them the time off. Okay, what are their plans? Be sensitive, reach an agreement. We all know they've changed the law so we can carry over up to 2 years now, the 4-week statutory minimum. But what does that actually mean for a business? We published an article in our newsletter about relying on a use it or lose it provision is not the best solution for an employer. They're actually not complying with their obligations under the law to make sure people have time to enjoy rest and leisure time. So take this opportunity to reflect and be creative around what the challenges you are facing, to think about how best you can support your people and ensure you've got a resilient workforce that is capable of bouncing back. Remember the definition, so they do not get overstressed, you know, stretched, fatigue, burnout, all that kind of thing. And communication, I think, is absolutely essential to that. You know, communication from the top, forcing and engendering a sense of trust and loyalty, so people feel they've got someone to talk to, they feel informed, they feel engaged about that. Think outside the box. You know, you've got to let go of the previous ways of working. Okay, if you cannot work in the same way as you did before, whether it's because of a forced closure, whether it's because of a national lockdown, whether it's because you can't ensure cleanliness and COVID security in your workforce, find some other way to do it. Okay, it's had a massive impact on how we deliver our services. I'm used to working from home on occasion, but I've never worked from home for this long before. And I love my little 1-bed flat, but I don't love it this much. So we've all had to adapt to that kind of thing. And I think some of the hardest things we've seen is clients feeding back going, yeah, but it's not ideal and they're not as efficient from home. And, you know, some of them just aren't working. Well, I say that's an issue on a number of counts. One, it's trust. You know, how can you employ someone you don't trust to do the work? And secondly, it's about management. You know, well, manage their performance then. Don't let them get away with it. And I've tried to encourage much of my clients, and let's be honest, some colleagues, that they've got to embrace alternative ways of working. You know, if we have demonstrated this has worked for 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, okay, then the default should not be, right, okay, we don't need to anymore, let's revert to how it was before. Let's look at the increase in efficiencies, the increase in service, you know, the work-life balance impact, and I'll mention that again briefly as we go through. But there have been opportunities that present themselves during this crisis. We've developed new products as part of our offering. You know, we never used to do online toolkits before. We've done several of them now, particularly around the issues on remote working, short-term working, layoffs, the job retention scheme, all that kind of stuff, because we were getting so many calls. We needed to be able to signpost people to other guidance that was practical. So yeah, be mindful. I've had some clients who have repurposed their shop floors to make different products during this crisis. You know, other services have, like I mentioned, our security service, they've redeployed, changed their focus to try and keep their businesses alive. You've got to be open to change, and you've got to be open to these new opportunities. So next slide, please. So I mentioned briefly about employee engagement. It's an HR buzzword to a certain degree, and we pride ourselves on being no nonsense and being direct. But at its core, engagement is about leadership communication. Okay, it's about how invested are your people in your business and in your message, and are they coming along for the ride with you, or is it just okay, boss talking, ears closed, yeah, just let them get on with it, and I'll do my own thing. You've got to be positive, and as a leader, you've got to adapt to your audience. Okay, they will not adapt to you. Okay, so the strongest leaders in our businesses are the chameleons. Okay, they recognize the needs of their team, the needs of their employees, how they learn, how they communicate, and they adapt to get the best out of them. There have been too many old sort of management styles historically where they go, well, I'm the boss, this is my culture, this is my business, and this is how I do things. If you don't like it, there's the door. That doesn't work. That doesn't engender trust. That doesn't create a positively engaged workforce. And all it does is it increase attrition. So if you want a truly resilient workforce, you know, that is capable of moving and adapting with you and bouncing back from crisis, such as what we're seeing currently, you need to learn to adapt your style. It may sound stupid, but listening is more important than speaking. Obviously, I'm doing too much of the former at the moment. Because otherwise you don't get that feedback, the feedback you need to know that your message is landing as a good communicator. There was also a hosted web chat with some of the deputy and the ex-chairs of ACAS that I watched the other week. And some of the key sort of messages coming out of them talking about resilience was about being open, being honest, and being human. Okay, as a leader, as a line manager, you know, this is a very difficult situation. Everyone's feeling stressed. You may have plans, but let's just be honest about the situation, where you are as a business, what you need to do, and engage with people early to make sure that they feel involved in the process. That's how you encourage and engender trust and loyalty with your people. They feel that you're being genuine with them, and they trust you to take them on to the next step of the process. And obviously, if you empower your local and line managers, you divest responsibility, and people feel more empowered to do it in a nutshell. So if we go on to other consultations, so next slide. I think that's the next slide. Consultation, obviously there's been a lot of consultation going on, and there are different types of consultation. From an employment law perspective, it's a conversation. It's a two-way conversation. So I would always recommend you establish a forum early for consultation and communication, particularly if you're going through crisis. It's a way to make sure everyone feels supported, everyone feels engaged, and they've got someone else to support them, i.e. their team representative. So there are various elements of legislation, whether it's TOLCRA, the Trade Union and Labour Relations Consolidation Act, or whether it's the ICE regulations, the Information and Consultation of Employee regulations, that can help you guide and govern a forum. But it's really, really powerful. Proactively engage with trade unions. There's been a lot of talk about how well businesses and unions have been working during this crisis. Historically, unions have been seen as a bit of a blocker to business and development. But if you get a good relationship and you get good reps, they can actually be a really powerful tool. So use them. So that's really important to champion. And obviously, I've just noted there the legal obligation to consult triggers. You need to remember, we've had so many clients, and we have had some who have neglected to seek advice at an appropriate point and have had what we call protected award claims, which is 90 days pay per infected employee if you fail to consult under your legal obligations. So that's a massive bill if you don't get it right. So yeah, so 20 or more employees redundant in any one establishment in a 90-day period where you're changing T's and C's. Now remember, putting people designated furloughed workers was a change of T's and C's. So broadly speaking, there should have been some collective consultation there if you were going to furlough more than 20 people. And obviously TUPE transfers, there's 10 as a threshold for information and consultation. Next slide, please. I'm conscious of time. So following on from what Joe and Emily, and I absolutely echo and champion everything that they were saying, but employers, you also have this duty of care, this obligation to be sensitive to individuals' needs and circumstances. Okay, everyone's been impacted differently, so take a beat, take time out to find out how your people are doing. Okay, actually care, ask them how they're doing. Okay, there are some people with genuine health anxiety during this pandemic. Now, whether you as an individual think that's people being overly sensitive or that's irrational, it's not for you to judge how they feel and what they're thinking and what genuine concerns they may have, whether it's for themselves or whether it's for their young family, disabled relatives, etc. You know, find out, be sensitive, and obviously try and support them, signpost them to the various resources that are available. Have regular engagement and communication is key. Now, whether you do that from a corporate level, whether you do it through the line management, I'd always strongly recommend a strong line manager relationship is absolutely essential for everything, whether it's people management, whether it's employee engagement. That is the key core relationship. Okay, if you don't have a good relationship with your line manager, then you're more likely to be aggrieved at work, and an aggrieved person is more likely to become litigious. Okay, and they're not going to perform well. They're more likely to claim against you. Okay, so adapt and publish your policies and your risk assessments. Be very open and transparent about that, how you're changing the way you're working, your COVID security, your health and safety, but then also your remote working policy, perhaps your attendance management policies, as my fellow presenters mentioned, your sick pay policy. You know, are you being clear about what happens if you're symptomatic? Are you going to operate a negative test or you have to stay at home policy, as some people have been doing? Or are you going to have a robust sending people home policy, in which case, is that on pay? Is that not on pay? Is it sick pay? Is it company pay? Be clear, make a decision, make sure it's in line with the law, and communicate it. Okay. Any breaches of your policies, especially health and safety, you must enforce robustly. You know, not only in the interest of the health and safety of your colleagues and the people that you're responsible for, but also to be seen to be enforcing compliance. Okay, it's a massive error to let things slide. It looks like you're condoning matters, it damages morale, and therefore reduces the resilience of your workforce. Okay, because they think the rules are just lip service, that they're not enforced. If you're having issues with or employees are struggling, you can refer to occupational health services. As my presenters mentioned, employee assistance programs, really, really valuable. Then they don't always have to be expensive. We've worked with partners based out of Coventry before Valentine, I can think of as one of them. They can provide cost-effective solutions both for occupational health and EAPs. So think about it. That's if you don't qualify for the free stuff, which I didn't know about, Joe. So thank you for that. And obviously, if you do have to implement any adjustments to working conditions or arrangements, review them regularly. Make sure they're fit for purpose. Make sure they're still working or they're right, and change them on a regular basis. And if you do implement a temporary change, make sure it's clear it's temporary and that you reserve the right to revert to previous working if that's appropriate. Okay, next slides before we finish off. So I wanted to echo the stress stuff that my colleagues were talking about. Stress is that thing, quite rightly, it's almost impossible to quantify, but it has a massive impact, not only on our health and our strength of our immune system, but our ability to adapt, ability to change, and our performance. So ways that you can manage that as an employer is to ensure that there is clear visibility of workload, and you are aware of working hours that are being undertaken, especially for remote workers. It is so easy for remote workers to be working longer hours, believe it or not, because the laptop's there, the phone's there, it's dinging at midnight. You know, you wake up, you roll out of bed, and oh look, it's there. I'll just check my emails, and it's 7:30 in the morning. Or you get involved in a piece of work, and all of a sudden it's 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. That is not sustainable. Everyone can do it for a short period of time, but no one can do it forever. Okay, so as an employee, you have a responsibility to monitor that. Okay, see where the work is going. Are there peaks? Are there troughs? Are there hot, busy times? Are there low times? Is there a way to even that out? You know where to put additional resource to alleviate pressure, alleviate stress, and obviously repurpose resource where there is not that high demand. Okay, you need to ensure that there's a balanced and fair workload distribution amongst your team as well. How often is it so easy just to load stuff onto the people that you trust, the people that will get it done? But if their workload gets up too much and then their colleagues aren't having the same, that's not fair. Maybe some of the colleagues are very happy about that. Maybe they're resentful, they're getting preferential treatment, but the person you're loading on is going to break at some point. Management's all about setting targets, making sure they're visible and that they're fair and reasonable. They don't necessarily have to be agreed. That's a mistake a lot of people make. At the end of the day, the employer is still the employer. It's good to have engagement and someone who's bought in to their targets. However, it's still for the business to set. but make sure they're reasonable. You know, are they doable under the circumstances? Make sure you've got a coaching and support mechanism in place, particularly with the line manager. Check in with them on a regular basis. And when thinking about sort of particularly the peaks of pressure people are experiencing, think everyone can sprint for a short time, but slow and steady wins the race. You know, and I think in certain areas, peaks of production and service peaks, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You know, so we need to make sure that we're pacing things correctly. And just to show how bad it can get as my last offering, if we go to the next slides, last slide. Performance and challenge work together, and I have borrowed this from Heart Matters. We do a course in building, transforming stress and building resilience with some of our associates. So there is a curve, there is a peak when it comes, as you increase challenge, performance does go up, but it doesn't go up indefinitely. So if we click through, we can see how this develops. So you start with healthy pressure. Okay, yeah, come on guys, we need to ramp things up a bit. Right, let's get going. It's going to get busy, but come on, let's see. And people do rise to the occasion. You get to a point of optimal performance, but then things change if you don't let up. So as we move through, there is a hyperreactive stage where things start to slip, which then lead to emotional and physical exhaustion, and eventually it leads to damage to health, okay, and a total breakdown. And that is due to consistent challenge without any support, without any resilience to give them the ability to react to that. So if we click again, you'll see, and certainly if any of you feel like I do sometimes, stress, including fatigue, peak, often where there's a change in a perception, and that's the perception of the employee about the circumstances they're working in, okay? Now, you as the employer might think, well, nothing's changed. We're just busy. Yeah, but something's changed. Suddenly, I'm not seeing it as pressure or just a busy time. I'm seeing it as a badly managed situation, unfair expectations, and I'm burning out, okay? So you've got to manage that peak, okay? And if you implement some of these tools and tips and tricks in relation to resilience, you'll get the final curve, hopefully, Chris, which is what resilience is all about. Okay, you will still get that optimal performance, but you can manage and maintain that higher level of performance for longer. Okay, that's it. Pretty on time, I think, a little bit. So thank you very much, everybody.
Oh, thank you so much, Adam. What a whistle-stop tour, and how insightful. That was a really good session, coupled with some really practical tips, as you say. And then in conjunction with Emily and Joe's slides as well, I think already we've had some really good feedback regarding today's session. I know that Chris is going to send out the slides, so that's really helpful. I just wanted to check, there isn't any questions come up on the chat, as I say, just really good feedback. But has anybody, any of our attendees today, got any questions for Adam, Emily or Joe? Oh, I've got something come up here. Emily, when we hopefully exit the national lockdown restrictions on the 2nd of December, how do you envisage the government's exit strategy? Will we go back to the previous tier system, or do you think they will possibly do something different, possibly introducing more levels to the tier system like Scotland?
To be honest, I wouldn't like to speculate too much. We are expecting to come out into a tiered system, but there may well be some changes from what we've seen. So they're just working through that at the moment. So I hope to have some more clarity in the next week or two.
Have you had any timelines of when you might get some clarity? Have they sort of said expected to land end of next week or anything like that? Or
not clear at the moment. So we'll obviously help to communicate that message locally as soon as we have that clarity.
Yeah, that would be great. I know that we've been working really closely together to try. It's consistency in communication, isn't it? And trying to get those messages out. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? But thank you.
I mean, it all depends on what happens with the rates, obviously. So as I say, we seem to be seeing perhaps a bit of a slowdown on the increase, but yet to see it coming down. So it's just crucial to see what happens in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I suppose that managing of the universities coming back as well, I think that was a big piece on the news last week or so, that window of them coming back as well. So yeah, it's certainly a time of lots of information coming out. Has anybody else got any questions they want to ask our presenters? No, I did have one just around the employee assistant programme, Joe, that, as I say, we've got the links through to. I know when it was introduced, we were doing some work with Ian Flynn, that it was more based around town centre businesses and those smaller businesses, but those in the high street. Has that been opened up to all small businesses less than 10 employees?
I believe it has. It's any micro and small business, yes, of 10 and less. I don't know if, Emily, you know anything different to that. I will check it and make sure that it comes back if it's anything different. But I believe.
I mean, this is when I was talking back in the summer. So, you know, gosh, the context and everything has changed, because back in the summer we were hoping we were making that steady, you know, rise out of the pandemic. So yes, it might have changed, but I just wanted to double check. But that'd be great. So when we send the information out to all our attendees today, we can give that clarity, because it certainly is very useful, as Adam picked up, that those businesses less than 10 can access that. That'd be great. Okay. I think that was it from everybody. We've done really well, 10:32. As I say, we've had some brilliant feedback already, and I certainly have got some nuggets of information to take away and to talk to the team, both those resource information, as I say, those links and the Thrive at Work, the Home Workers Toolkit. As I say, there's lots of volume, but then also coupled with Adam's very insightful and practical tips around how we can work very closely with our workforce to help them through this difficult time. So have a lovely day, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session. In 2 weeks, we've got the final of our resilience events, looking at finance and financial practices. That's 2 weeks today, and I know Chris is working hard on our events schedule through to December and through to 2021 as well, so please keep eyes and ears and everything peeled, and we look forward to seeing you on more of our sessions. We hope maybe we might be able to do face-to-face again soon. So we'll obviously keep you updated on that as well. So lovely to see you all today, and stay safe, everyone. Take care.